morning. I'm Ken Biberaj, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. In the news today, Sam Bankman-Fried, founder of FTX, was arrested in the Bahamas this week, and President Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act yesterday. Today, we head to Cleveland for a conversation with Mayor Justin Bibb. So this is a Bibb meets Bibb conversation. Justin, how are you?
Well, Ken, how are you? Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. Congratulations again. How's the first year been going?
Well, I'll tell you this, 1 year in mayor years feels like 2 years, by the way. But, I still got my hairline, no gray hair. So I think that's a good sign for what's ahead here in Cleveland.
Look, give us a quick lay of the land, right? Cleveland is an iconic city on the waterfront, known for rock and roll, right? Give everyone a little context. What was your ramp up over the last 10 years of public service? What made you run? How was that race? And any shockers since you came into office?
My
cheers,
journey.
by the way,
Cheers, by the way. Some good Cleveland coffee, by the way. My journey to the seat was one that I did not expect. Both of you and I were proud alums of the American University in DC.
The American.
And I remember going to DC for college at American because I was so inspired by 9/11. And my original major was going to be international relations with a focus on Arabic and learning Arabic, going to the Foreign Service because I thought that was the best way to give back and serve my country. And I remember I was working on Capitol Hill for then Senator Barack Obama. And at the same time, I got this fellowship to do community organizing in Southeast DC in Anacostia. And this is 2006. And at the time, Anacostia had some of the highest dropout rates in the country, some of the highest HIV and AIDS rates that rivaled third world nations. And as I was knocking on doors and organizing with students, a lot of them looked like me, had the same background that I had growing up in the inner city of Cleveland. And as a naive college freshman, I thought that, this is the world's most powerful city. There's no poverty. Everything's great in DC. But as you know, Anacostia is a stone's throw away from the Capitol. And I realized that, my passion and focus should be on how do we turn America's inner cities around. And so for the last decade or so, I've been working as a business strategist, working in banking, and also as a nonprofit leader, all trying to figure out how do we restore the promise of great American cities like Cleveland. And I saw COVID happen. We had a terrible response to COVID in Cleveland. Then we had the murder of George Floyd. And I realized that this was the time to bring bold, dynamic, visionary leadership to my hometown. And I got my clipboard, got my tennis shoes, I got on the ballot, and the rest is history.
That's amazing. So look, you come in, and I remember we had a conversation, I forget who it was with, I think another mayor. And we were talking about affordable housing, crime, education, what do you prioritize? And they were like, yes. It was you're running the city, and there's just so many priorities. There's an endless list. It was staggering, the stat I read about 90% of Cleveland housing was built when it was okay to use lead, right? So when you're talking about housing and equity and so on, how do you triage and prioritize the execution of your vision for Cleveland?
Well, my vision for the city is twofold. Number one, making sure we have a more modern and responsive city hall that prioritizes the basics, whether it be trash pickup, fixing potholes. As any mayor will tell you, if you don't get those things done, then you're not doing your job, first and foremost. But then secondly, really restoring the promise of our city for the next generation. And for a long time, Cleveland's been on the sidelines, and I've been working very hard over the last year to pitch Cleveland to the world. And so, we've been focused on, doing the hard work of redesigning and reimagining what public safety should look like. We've negotiated a brand new pay increase for our police officers. We made it a better culture in our police department, which allows our cops to wear ball caps, have beards and tattoos. Before I got into office, they couldn't do that. Now all of our officers are required to walk the beat, in the first and second shift all across the city to have more of a visible police presence. And we've seen a major drop in violent crime in almost every major category in Cleveland because of these efforts. Secondly, we need to make sure that we have the right technology to serve a 21st century city. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, is that the service delivery we need to provide as mayors needs to be on the same level as an Amazon or FedEx, right? I mean, our residents want real-time customer service, and we're trying to deliver that right now in the city. And then really what's important for me is restoring Cleveland's East Side. You know, our East Side at the height of the 1960s was the beacon of the Black middle class. And we've seen historic disinvestments due to redlining and white flight. And we're trying to turn the tide to restore the Black middle class in our East Side. And we're going to be launching our Marshall Plan to do that early next year. So it's a big, bold agenda, but one I'm confident we can deliver on every single day for the residents of Cleveland.
Amazing. So let's go back real quick to criminal justice reform. You know, you were inspired to jump into this race and become mayor in part because of the passing of George Floyd and so on. How do you balance, right? Like, what's the message when it comes to, you know, being tough on crime, but also identifying efforts to reform the criminal justice system, right? And I feel like it takes time to do this type of work, right? So what's your message to folks in Cleveland about how do you kind of bring down violent crime? How do you address crime? But then also do the hard work that will take time and may not have immediate results, but will pay off dividends in the future.
You know, my philosophy and theory of change around how I view public safety and criminal justice reform is really rooted in my lived experience growing up in the city. My late grandmother, who passed away this summer on her 93rd birthday, we call her Grandma Sarah. She was the first organizer of our Street Watch Club growing up on my block in Cleveland. And this is at the height of the early 1990s when crack was everywhere. Gun violence was very prevalent. And her philosophy was very simple. Number one, when I call the police, I want them to show up on time. And number two, they need to respect my rights as a hard-working, tax-paying citizen of this city and of this country. And that's my philosophy on public safety. You know, we as Democrats can be pro-police and respect law enforcement, but also hold officers accountable when they step out of line. And I'm a son of a cop, and I saw this from my father's lived experience. And, you know, I remember those very hard conversations when I got my first car. He says, Justin, if you get pulled over, keep your hand on the wheel. It's yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and just follow instructions. Unfortunately, that's our society. But we're making great strides in Cleveland. You know, when I was on the ballot last year, organizers put on the ballot an initiative to create the toughest independent civilian oversight board in America on policing. It passed by 60% of the vote, and I won my election by 63% of the vote. And I was the only candidate for mayor who endorsed this ballot initiative. And just last week, we finally got our nominees to this commission passed by city council, and we're going to show America how to get it done right here in Cleveland.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your experience engaging with the private sector, capitalizing on innovation. You're under 40, right? You're a young, dynamic mayor of a major city, right? I think you installed your first EV charging station.
Yes, we did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, yes. Tell us about this. Yeah.
Well, it's so important. You know, Ken, I really believe that Cleveland and other mid-sized cities like Cleveland, this is our moment coming out of this pandemic. This is the era of the mid-sized city. And so innovation has to be at the heart of what we do. Everything from how we're making sure that every snowplow truck in Cleveland has the GPS smart device to ensuring we create an easier process for folks to grow and start a business in the city. And the private sector is a key part of this effort. You know, we only have so much capacity as city leaders. And I believe that one of my major responsibilities as mayor is to be a collaborator in chief. And so I'm working with the Chamber of Commerce on our vision for the lakefront, working with Bedrock and Dan Gilbert for our vision for the Cuyahoga River. I partner with the Cavs this year to bring back midnight basketball so we can cut down on violent crime in the summer. So all those things allow us to be more innovative, but collaboration is critical to advancing our innovation agenda for the city.
So you just touched on it, right? I mean, and I hate to say it, I sometimes forget Cleveland is such a prominent lakefront community.
We are. Right? I call it America's North Coast. We're back. We got
So
the
tell
East
us
Coast,
about
West Coast. Now it's time to bring back America's North Coast, baby.
it's funny because I feel like sometimes waterfronts are taken for granted. And I was in New York from like '05 to 2017. And during the Bloomberg years, there was a very strong emphasis in kind of taking the dilapidated waterfront properties and, converting them. And that's how you end up with Hudson Yard and, Hudson River, bike paths and all this amazing stuff, right? Like, what's your vision for the lakefront? How do you activate it? And you have the unique kind of distinction of this lakefront being freshwater, not saltwater as well, right? So how does that play? Is that a material factor in your thinking of the future and so on?
It's a major. The Great Lakes and Lake Erie is home to 20% of the world's fresh water. That's a major deal right in my backyard here in Cleveland. Just last month, we approved a new master planning process for revitalizing our North Coast lakefront. We actually poached a firm from New York, James Corner Field Operations, who did the High Line and Domino Park in Williamsburg. So taking a world-class firm like Field Operations, and they're going to help us really redesign and reimagine our lakefront for the 21st century. And we're engaging key stakeholders like the Cleveland Browns, the Great Lakes Side Center, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because they all sit on our lakefront. And think about this for a second, Ken. This is 14 miles and over 2,000 acres of prime time real estate that I can't wait to show the world how great it is. The other thing that I want to mention in terms of water and the emerging water innovation economy, you may have heard that Intel is committed up to $100 billion in Ohio. They're building a brand new semiconductor plant in Columbus. You know what those semiconductor plants need? They need access to water. And so we have that pipeline here in Cleveland to really make sure that America's heartland, the Silicon heartland, takes advantage of our great asset in Lake Erie for the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so I work in commercial real estate, and a large part of what we're doing now is larger site selection, right? Where geography no longer matters. Before it was always like, office leasing, site selection, major cities. And I feel like the map has kind of just been shredded, and this real moment is real. And so much of what we hear about is access to water, access to talent, access to energy. And then with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS Act, how focused are you on federal government initiatives that are kind of passing, as well as new kind of companies that are going to be looking for new homes to tap into the right talent? Like, how do you think about framing the message of Cleveland to that audience?
It is so critical for Cleveland because we have so many assets to build on that, in my opinion, creates a very strong value proposition for new companies and new talent to call Cleveland home in the future. And, you mentioned former Mayor Mike Bloomberg, and he has this amazing quote. He says that talent attracts capital, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And pre-pandemic, it was all about, we're going to move to New York to work in finance. We're going to move to Silicon Valley to work in technology. Now, anybody can get their smartphone, get their laptop and their business plan, and work anywhere in the world. And we're seeing that in our numbers here in Cleveland. According to LinkedIn, Cleveland is number 2 to Madison, Wisconsin for new net tech migration remote jobs in the tech sector right here in Cleveland. And so it's all about making sure we tout these assets long term. But then you talked about the importance of working with the federal government. And I want to say this, it is so amazing that we have a chief executive officer in our president who believes that restoring America starts with investing in America's cities. And so we're using the historic ARPA investments, the historic IRA bill, the historic bipartisan infrastructure bill to really focus on infrastructure ready projects to make Cleveland competitive for the 21st century.
I think Cleveland was the 5th largest recipient of ARPA funds, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, the 8th largest, rather. We received over $512 million from President Biden through the American Rescue Plan. So we're using that money to make sure every home in Cleveland is lead safe and free of lead paint. We're using it to connect up to 50,000 families with high-speed broadband because during the pandemic, we were ranked the least connected city in America. And then we're also using those investments to get more sites ready for economic development so we can create job density in the urban core once again in our city.
So you've had a bit of a population reduction over time, right? How is that impacting? How's that playing out? I mean, how do you ensure retention and recruitment and people flocking, right? You hear these amazing stories, Nashville and Austin and Miami, right? Like, how do you make Cleveland a place that is a destination when people are looking at the map and saying for quality of life, like, yeah, I should be thinking about it from a talent perspective?
In the 1950s, Cleveland was the sixth largest city in the United States.
Wow.
Think about that for a second. Over 1.6 million residents. Now we have roughly 380,000 in the urban core, an MSA of over 1.3 million. But I think, with the right vision and the right collective action, we can get to a point where we have a population of up to 500,000 over the next 10 to 15 years. And that's my vision for the city. And at one point in the 1990s, because of the work of Mayors George Voinovich and former Mayor Michael R. White, we were a model for America on how to leverage public-private partnerships to restore Cleveland's greatness. And then, we took a nosedive after the Great Recession. But now this is our time. This is Cleveland's moment and Ohio's moment to lead the way. And I'm excited for the work ahead.
So how do you strike this balance of making sure potholes are filled, crime stays down, but hitting the road to go around the country to meet business leaders, meet partners in the federal government, maybe even travel globally and pitch Cleveland? Like, how important is that balance, and how do you strike it?
Without a doubt, there has to be a balance. But because of this moment right now, with the historic federal investment we're seeing in cities like Cleveland, with the rise of remote work and what that means for opportunity for a mid-sized city like Cleveland, I cannot afford to do both. Got to take care of the basics, but it's time to sell Cleveland and pitch Cleveland to the world. And surprised how many conversations I've had over the last year where people have said, "Oh my God, I haven't talked to anybody from Cleveland in nearly 2 decades because we were asleep at the wheel." But now we're showing up and in the right places to make sure we get our fair share of resources. And I think the residents have been craving that kind of bold, dynamic, visionary leadership that our team has put forth so far since we took office in January.
So previously, you spent some time working with Teach for America, and education has always been a large part of what you've been focused on. Talk a little bit about your education plan, from cradle to college, right? How do you think about it? How do you think about vocational education opportunities, meeting the kind of new jobs, whether they're semiconductor jobs or, innovation type jobs? How do you think about all that?
As any mayor would tell you, we can't be a competitive nation or have competitive cities if we don't have a highly educated, productive workforce. It's table stakes. And we've seen so much disruption in public education coming out of the pandemic. I'm the only mayor in the state of Ohio that has mayoral control of our schools. And right now we're in the middle of a brand new search for a new CEO. Our current CEO, Eric Gordon, has done an amazing job of restoring the image of our local public school district. He's elevated the progress of our public school system. But as we chart the next phase of our work in Cleveland, this is really about ensuring every child in our school district has the skills they need to be ready for college, a career, and life in general. And so a heavy emphasis on closing the literacy gap that we see for our children so they can get the head start they deserve. A heavy emphasis on exposing young people in middle school, not in high school, but in middle school, about what jobs in smart manufacturing, healthcare, and technology they can get right here in Cleveland. Because right now in our economy, we have over 50,000 in-demand jobs we can't fill.
Wow.
And the over 30,000 students we have in our school district, they are that pipeline. And it's my responsibility as mayor to support our companies and make sure that our children can take the jobs of the future. So we're laser focused on it. And it's a very important part of our vision to move the community forward.
Great. As you're building out your administration and thinking about the city at large, how do you prioritize and focus on making sure it's as inclusive as possible and expand access to opportunity, right? Like, how have you prioritized that at City Hall, and how can the city more broadly ensure an inclusive community and access for folks?
As this nation underwent a racial reckoning in 2020, there was a lot of conversation about equity, inclusion, diversity, and justice. And to me, those aren't just words we put on a paper. These are values, and the way in which I operate as mayor is the way in which my cabinet operates as a leadership team. Practically speaking, what that means for me is how do we, number one, make sure we continue to remain close and approximate to the residents we're serving every single day, right? I try to spend less time as I can in my office because I want to be in the neighborhoods, talking to the residents, talking to business owners about what's working, what's not working, and how we serve them every single day. And so it's really making sure that we ground public policy and governing every single day in the lived experiences of the residents we're serving. And that's our philosophy on inclusion and justice and equity as a city.
Got it. So talk about the importance of sports, right? Let's talk about the Browns. I believe there's a Major League Soccer team coming to Cleveland. We're in the middle of the final.
Next. Yes.
Right? So what's the significance of that, and how do you leverage kind of, I remember in college, right? Like if your college had a good sports team like the Ohio State, right? You all of a sudden were able to kind of recruit and get some energy, and it's a great way for just spirit, right, and connectivity, right? Like talk about MLS, talk about getting out there and not just bringing businesses, but also like sports and attention to the community.
Well, we're so excited to be a recipient of a new MLS Next team in Cleveland. Cleveland is quickly emerging as a soccer town, but we really punch above our weight with 3 major league sports teams, all concentrated in our urban core right downtown. The Guardians, the Browns, and my favorite, the Cleveland Cavaliers. And so, we're really excited about our great sports teams. And, sports is in our civic DNA in this town. But not just our major sports teams. Just last week, I was able to give my first key to the city to our new state football champion, Glenville High School Tar Blooders, the first team in our city's history to win a state football championship. Wow. And these young men, they go to an all-male academy in the inner city of Cleveland, go through so much. And the fact that they won their first state championship is a testament to their greatness and the testament to the grit and resilience of our great city.
Amazing. Tell us a little bit about being a young mayor and advice you give young people, and motivation, and your efforts to kind of get out there and talk to people and kind of show them your story and what you've been able to accomplish and how it's been an inspiration and how they can pursue opportunities on their own.
Yeah, for me, the biggest piece of advice I give young people is don't be afraid to fail and dream greatly. I took a big risk running for mayor, but the risk that I took pales in comparison to the risk that our first responders make every single day to keep our city safe and secure. It pales in comparison to the single mom trying to work 2 or 3 jobs to put food on the table. It pales in comparison to the activists who are fighting to make sure that the promise of this nation continues to be real and that we as a city live up to our core ideals. And so for me, it was a risk worth taking. And as the late RFK said, those who dare to dream greatly never achieve greatly. And to me, that's my call to action, and it's that spirit that gets me up every night when I'm having a bad day. You think about the what if, it's important we keep that center.
So what do you hope to accomplish by the end of your term, 5 years, 10 years down the road? What do you want your legacy to be when people look back at what your time in office, whether it's just 1 term, 2 terms?
Yeah, well, if I'm blessed to be reelected over the next 7 years, it is my dream and hope that Cleveland will be a model for America on policing and safety and police accountability. I want us to be a model for America of restoring the American dream and restoring the promise of economic opportunity, particularly in Black and brown neighborhoods. I want us to be a model for America around climate justice and how we made our lake and our river and our waterfronts an amazing model for resiliency and equity and planning. And if we do those 3 things, I think our city has a boundless potential and opportunity.
Well, look, Mr. Mayor, we know you have a busy day. We're so grateful you took the time to come on Coffee with Ken to chat with us. So inspired that you're an American University alum.
Go Eagles, baby. Go Eagles.
Once an Eagle, always an Eagle. Don't forget it. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Excited about your success and everything you're going to accomplish. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. We're going to take a little break over the holiday season. Wishing everybody a happy new year and happy holiday season. We'll be back with a lot of programming in 2023. In the meantime, you can visit us at coffeewithken.com. You can like, subscribe, follow us, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. In the meantime, Mr. Mayor, great seeing you, and we hope to see you in Washington soon.
Hope to see you in Cleveland soon.
Deal. Fair enough.
Take care, bud.